I still remember the way he laughed, a sharp, mocking sound that echoed in our tiny living room, like I had just told the funniest joke in the world. College? You? My dad leaned back in his chair, shaking his head. You think I'm gonna waste money on that? My stomach twisted. I had spent months working on my application, pulling extra shifts to save for the little things, textbooks, a bus pass, maybe even a second-hand laptop. But tuition? I needed help. I looked at my mom, hoping she would say something. She just kept folding laundry like she didn't hear me. My older brother, the golden child, snorted from the couch. Just get a job like the rest of us. Like the rest of them. The ones who never left, never tried. I swallowed the lump in my throat and nodded. Okay, that was the day I realized something. I was on my own. And years later, when my father showed up at my doorstep, desperate and broke, I made sure he knew it too. Growing up, I always knew my place in the family. My older brother, Ryan, was the golden child. He could do no wrong. When he got caught smoking in high school, boys will be boys. When he failed a class, the teacher was out to get him. My parents treated him like a prince, always making excuses, always bending over backward to give him whatever he wanted. Then, there was me, the quiet one, the one who learned to keep my head down and do things on my own. I got straight A's. No one cared. I got into honor classes. No one noticed. I won a scholarship for a summer program. My dad laughed and said, "Sounds like a waste of time." So, I stopped telling them things. I worked late shifts at a diner after school, saving up for college. I kept my dreams to myself, whispering them in my head when I felt like giving up. But then, something gave me hope. My boss at the diner, Maria, was the first person who actually believed in me. One night, after I stayed late to help close up, she pulled me aside. "Kid, I see how hard you work," she said. "I know you're saving up for something big." I told her about my dream, about how I wanted to go to college, study business, and maybe, just maybe, start my own thing one day. Maria smiled. "You remind me of myself at your age." Then she did something I never expected. She offered to help. "If you get in, I'll write you a recommendation, and I know some people who might be able to help you with financial aid," she said. "You're smart, and you work harder than anyone I know. You deserve a chance." For the first time in my life, I felt seen. I felt worth something. So I went home that night with my heart pounding. I had spent months preparing my college application, filling out forms, writing essays. And now, with Maria's help, maybe I actually had a shot. But before I sent it in, I made a mistake. I asked my dad for help, just a little, just for the application fees, nothing crazy. I thought maybe, just maybe, he would be proud of me, that he'd want better for me even if he never showed it before. Instead, he laughed in my face. "College? You?" he scoffed, shaking his head. "You think I'm gonna waste money on that?" Ryan snickered from the couch. My mom didn't even look up. And that was it. That was the moment I knew I was alone in this. But I also knew something else. I was going to prove them wrong. I should have known better. I should have known that expecting support from my family was like expecting rain in the middle of a drought. But a small part of me still hoped. Maybe deep down my dad would see my hard work. Maybe he'd be proud. But no. He laughed. My brother laughed. My mom stayed silent. Fine. I didn't need them. I worked even harder, pulling double shifts at the diner. I applied for every scholarship I could find. I used Maria's connections to get my application fees waived. And against all odds, I got in. The acceptance letter came in a thin envelope, but the words inside felt massive. "Congratulations! We are pleased to offer you admission." I wanted to cry. I wanted to scream. I had done it. I had done it all on my own. But when I told my family, my dad barely looked up from his TV. "Good for you, just don't expect any handouts." Ryan rolled his eyes. "What's the point? You're just gonna drop out and come crawling back like everyone else." That stung. But I swallowed my pride, packed my bags, and left. College wasn't easy. I worked part-time, survived on ramen, and stretched every dollar. But I loved it. For the first time in my life, I was surrounded by people who believed in something bigger than the small town we came from. I stopped calling home after a while. There was no point. Then one day I got a call from Maria. "Hey, kid. I need to tell you something," she said, her voice hesitant. My stomach tightened. "What's wrong?" Maria sighed. "Your dad came by the diner. He was talking to some of the guys, bragging. That alone was weird. My dad never bragged about me. He was telling them how he got you into college," Maria said. "How he pulled some strings, paid for your applications, and made sure you had everything you needed." I felt like the air had been sucked out of my lungs. "What?" I whispered. I tried to call him out, but he just laughed, said you should be grateful for everything he's done for you. I clenched my fists. My father, the man who laughed in my face, who refused to help, who told me I was wasting my time, was taking credit for my success. It got worse. Maria hesitated. "There's more. He's been asking around about your financial aid. I think he's trying to..." I didn't hear the rest. My mind was spinning. I hung up and checked my emails, my bank accounts, everything. And there it was. A flagged request, under my financial aid profile. Someone had tried to change my status, claiming I had family support and didn't need as much assistance. If that change went through, I would lose my aid. I would have to drop out. I knew it was him. I had worked too hard, sacrificed too much. And now, my own father was trying to sabotage me just so he could look good. That was the moment something inside me broke. I wasn't just going to prove him wrong, I was going to make sure he regretted ever underestimating me. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I sat in my tiny dorm room staring at the financial aid portal, my fists clenched so tight my nails dug into my palms. My father was trying to take away the one thing I had fought for. No, not this time. I took a deep breath and started making calls. First, I contacted my financial aid office. I explained the situation, detailing how my father had never supported me and how I was completely independent. They flagged his request as fraudulent. Next, I called Maria. "Do you have any proof of what he said at the diner?" I asked, my voice steady. She sighed. "Not recorded, but a few people heard him, and I'll back you up." That was enough. Then, I did something I never thought I'd do. I went home. I hadn't stepped foot in that house in over a year. It felt smaller, colder, like the walls had shrunk in on themselves. My dad was sitting in his usual chair, beer in hand, feet propped up. Ryan was on the couch playing some game on his phone. My mom was in the kitchen, pretending not to notice me. He barely looked up. "Look who finally decided to show up." I didn't waste time. "I know what you did," I said, my voice sharp. "You tried to mess with my financial aid." Dad smirked. "So? You think they're gonna believe you over me? I'm your father." That word meant nothing coming from him. "They already flagged your request as fraud," I said coolly. "Oh, and I also reported you for identity misrepresentation. That's a federal offense, by the way." His smirk faded. "You wouldn't..." "I already did." He sat up straighter. "You ungrateful little..." I cut him off. "I worked my ass off to get where I am. You laughed in my face when I asked for help. And now that I made it without you, you want to take the credit? You tried to ruin everything just to make yourself look good." Ryan scoffed. "Jesus, you're so dramatic. Dad was just..." "Stay out of this," I snapped. "You're just mad because for once I'm not the one getting screwed over." My dad's face turned red. "You think you're better than us now? You think you're some big-shot college kid?" I stared him down. "No, but I know I'm better than you." Silence. My mom finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "You don't talk to your father that way." I turned to her. "You let him treat me like garbage my whole life. You never stood up for me, not once." She didn't deny it. She just looked down. I took a deep breath. I'm done with all of you. Then I delivered the final blow. You might want to start saving money, I said, looking my father dead in the eye. Because when you end up broke and desperate, don't bother coming to me. And then I walked out. A week later, I got a call from Ryan. I didn't answer. Then a text. Dad's pissed, you really screwed him over. I didn't reply. I blocked the number, and for the first time in my life, I felt free. I didn't look back. Walking out of that house was like shedding a heavy coat I had been forced to wear my entire life. The weight of my father's voice, my mother's silence, and my brother's smugness, it all crumbled behind me. I had spent years believing I needed their approval, that somehow, if I just worked hard enough, they'd finally see my worth. But the truth was, they never would, and I didn't need them to. At first, I expected the guilt to hit me, maybe even regret, but all I felt was relief. My dad tried to fight back, of course. He called, left angry voicemails, the usual nonsense, how I had betrayed my own family, how I was acting like a stranger, how family always comes first. Funny, because when I needed family, I got nothing but laughter. I blocked his number, then came Ryan. His messages were less angry, more manipulative. Look, you made your point. Dad's not perfect, but he's still our dad. You really gonna cut us off over this? I didn't respond. I didn't need to. He had never stood up for me before, and I wasn't about to let him guilt trip me into coming back now. Then, my mom. She didn't call. She didn't text. Just silence. It hurt, more than I wanted to admit. But deep down, I knew she had made her choice a long time ago. She always chose them. With my father out of the picture, I focused on myself. College was still tough. I worked, multiple jobs, took on extra shifts, and survived on cheap food. But for the first time, I didn't feel alone. Maria checked in on me often. She even sent me a little care package, coffee, snacks, and a handwritten note. Proud of you. Keep going. That note meant more to me than anything my parents had ever said. I pushed through. I graduated. I landed an amazing job, and I never looked back. Until one day, years later, when karma finally did its thing. It had been nearly 5 years since I cut ties with my family. I had a stable job, my own apartment, and a life I had built from the ground up. Then, out of nowhere, I got a message from an unknown number. Hey, it's Mom. Can we talk? I stared at my phone, my heart pounding. For a second, I considered ignoring it. But something in me, maybe curiosity, maybe closure, made me reply. What do you want? Her response came fast. It's your father. He's not doing well. I felt nothing. And? She hesitated. Then, the truth spilled out. My father had lost his job a year ago. My brother had moved out, and without me as his scapegoat, their perfect little family had started to fall apart. The house was in foreclosure. Bills were piling up. And my dad, the same man who laughed in my face when I asked for help, he was broke, desperate, and now suddenly they needed me. I agreed to meet my mom. Not out of sympathy, but because I wanted to see it for myself. She looked older, more tired. Her eyes were filled with something I had never seen before, regret. Your father, she started, but I cut her off. I don't care about him, I said. Why are you really here? She sighed. We're struggling. The house, it's being taken. And your father is... Let me guess, I said, leaning back. He wants my help now? She flinched. It's not like that, we just... No, I said, shaking my head. It is like that. I stared at her, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't the scared little kid begging for approval. I was in control now. You let him walk all over me for years, I said. You let him humiliate me. You let him try to destroy my future. And now, when he's suffering, you suddenly remember I exist? Tears welled up in her eyes. I'm sorry. I should have done more. I let out a dry laugh. Yeah, you should have. She wiped her eyes. I know I can't change the past, but please just think about helping him. Helping us. I leaned forward, looking her dead in the eye. Let me ask you something, I said. If I were the one struggling, if I had dropped out, failed, and needed help, would he have helped me? She didn't answer. She didn't need to. We both knew the truth. I stood up, grabbed my bag, and turned to leave. But before I walked away, I gave her one last thing, a mirror of the words my father had thrown at me all those years ago. Don't expect any handouts. Then I walked out. That was the last time I saw them. And you know what? I don't regret it. I spent my whole life thinking I needed their love, that if I just worked hard enough, they'd finally see me. But the truth is, some people will never see your worth until they need something from you, and by then, it's too late. I built my life on my own. I made it. And I don't owe them anything. So, if you've ever been told you're not enough, if you've ever been laughed at, underestimated, or made to feel small, listen to me. You don't need their approval. You don't need their validation. You only need you. And when they come crawling back, remember who you were before and who you are now, and never let them drag you down again.